I never set out to become the enemy of an entire neighborhood. In fact, when I signed the papers on my Green Valley house, I thought I was finally ending a chapter in my life that had been nothing but noise, stress, and vigilance. After 8 years of active duty in the military, and another 5 grinding away in cramped tech offices in downtown Seattle, my soul hungered for space. Simple space, where my lungs could take in more pine-scented air than car exhaust, where the horizon wasn't blocked by glass skyscrapers or fluorescent cubicles. When I found Green Valley Estates with its wide lots pressed against the rolling woodland beyond, it felt like the reset button I'd been looking for. Somewhere I could be a better version of myself, calmer, steadier, maybe even quieter. My work finally allowed it. As a software engineer for a cybersecurity firm, my office was wherever I planted my laptop. The pay was solid, the hours flexible, and the nature of the job meant I was already at ease with solitude and vigilance. I wasn't hoping for much, just a comfortable house, some silence, and the woods to disappear into when life pressed too tightly. At first, Green Valley delivered. My house stood modern and minimal, but backed by trees that whispered when the evening wind carried through. On weekends, I'd set up in the garage tinkering with side projects, the satisfaction of creating something tangible balancing out my hours of code. My closest ally in those early weeks was my neighbor, Sarah Johnson, a school teacher whose friendliness was pure rather than painted. She showed up with cookies once and smiled sheepishly when she said, "Don't take Evelyn too seriously. She means well, but she believes her law degree makes her queen." I didn't quite know what she meant yet, but a strange suspicion crept in that she wasn't joking. 2 weeks after moving in, the suspicion materialized. My doorbell chimed at precisely 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. On the porch stood a woman in her late 30s, tailored jeans and blazer, hair perfectly bobbed, a wicker welcome basket in her arms. If it sounds welcoming, it wasn't. Instead of homemade bread or neighborly generosity, the basket contained folders, HOA bylaws printed and tabbed with neon sticky notes, a guide to landscaping regulations, and a laminated sheet titled Community Standards, Green Valley's Legacy. She smiled, but her eyes never softened. "We're delighted to have new blood in Green Valley," she said as if she were inducting me into a club. "I'm Evelyn Richardson, your HOA president. Once you familiarize yourself with how we operate, I'm sure you'll love it here." That last sentence felt less like reassurance and more like a soft threat. I kept my head down for the next few months. I stuck to mowing the lawn every Saturday morning at the precise 3-inch regulation height. I only put my bins out the night before garbage day. I waved politely at board members on my walks, but avoided the monthly meetings at the community center. From Sarah's whispers, those gatherings weren't really meetings at all. They were performances starring Evelyn, her vice president Marcus Bennett, and a handful of allies who nodded through every decree while the rest of the community sat politely subdued. Still, I thought, if paying my quarterly $450 dues bought me peace, I could live with that. For a time, it nearly worked. By autumn, I had slipped into a rhythm, commuting from bedroom to office, then out into the woods with a backpack or to the garage with a toolbox. My background in Montana followed me quietly as a tradition, hunting. It wasn't about violence or trophies, it was a tie to memory, to my grandfather who put his first rifle in my hands as a boy, to the patience of waiting in stillness for the earth to yield its cycle, to that clear sense of providing food and respecting its cost. When I scouted through the woods bordering the community one October afternoon, I discovered 80 acres of pristine forest, wild and almost untouched. Curious, I checked the county records and hours later was exchanging emails with Frank Williams, the elderly owner now retired in Florida. That's when paradise cemented itself. Frank not only granted me permission, he seemed eager to share it. "Send me a picture if you get a nice buck," he wrote warmly. And so, one morning, rifle in hand, I entered those woods at dawn. By 9 a.m., I had my deer cleanly. I was kneeling in gratitude, hands methodically preparing the animal, when the sound of synthetic soles crunching along informal trails froze me. Out of the thinning mist appeared Evelyn, flanked by 5 women in coordinated athletic gear, their chatter evaporating in a flash of horror. Evelyn shrieked, her face twisting into something between disgust and fury. "What in God's name are you doing?" "This is a protected preserve." She raised her phone, snapping photos. I tried to explain legal hunting license, explicit permission from the owner. She would hear none of it. "This is barbaric." We manage these trails. Hunting is absolutely prohibited, she ranted on, her companions gasping as if they'd witnessed some ghastly massacre. 3 days later came the envelope. Bold, official-looking, plastered with Green Valley's crest. Inside, a violation notice: cruel hunting activities, community disturbance. Fine. $5,000 payable to the Green Valley Estates Association within 30 days. My first reaction was stunned laughter, then anger. They had no authority over Frank's land, no jurisdiction off HOA property. But Evelyn wasn't just fining me. She was setting the stage, painting me as the villain, the outsider bringing danger to her carefully curated kingdom. That fine? That little slip of paper they thought would box me in? It was the trigger. The first domino falling, the match dropped into kindling. Evelyn believed she controlled every inch, every tree, every birdhouse within sight of Green Valley. She didn't know she had just awakened someone with more patience than her pettiness, more discipline than her bureaucracy, and more knowledge of the law than she imagined mattered. She thought she was breaking me. What she'd done instead was start a war she couldn't possibly win. I held that violation letter in my hand longer than I should have, not because I feared it, but because I couldn't believe the sheer arrogance of it. $5,000 not for a broken rule in my backyard or an unapproved mailbox paint job, but for hunting, legally, on land the HOA didn't even own. It gnawed at me in a way no HOA threat ever could. This wasn't about lawn heights or garbage bins. This was about control, about someone like Evelyn twisting property law into her personal doctrine. What she hadn't counted on was that I knew enough about property law myself to smell the weakness in her claim. That night I called Frank Williams, the Florida retiree who still owned the forest. His sleepy voice came through the receiver, tinged with surprise and weariness. "They've been using my land?" he said after I explained what had happened with Evelyn. "Son, I had no idea. Never gave anyone permission to build a single thing out there. They sure as hell never asked me." His hurt tone confirmed what I suspected. The so-called Green Valley trails weren't community resources at all. They were trespassing in plain daylight dressed up as stewardship. Frank sighed heavily. "Property taxes keep climbing, and I can't afford much these days with medical bills. Selling's been on my mind. Didn't think I'd live to see the day someone started acting like they owned my woods for me." And just like that, a thought anchored inside me. What if I bought it? Once that notion latched on, I couldn't shake it. I pulled up county records, traced the boundaries of Frank's 80-acre parcel, and mapped them against the trailhead signs Evelyn bragged about in newsletters. Every inch of it lined up with Frank's deed. The audacity floored me. Benches installed, bird feeders nailed into trees, even fundraising brochures depicting the area as an official Green Valley amenity. In fact, at the next HOA meeting I attended, Evelyn tried to shame me again, until I spotted a glossy pamphlet on the community table, titled Green Valley Nature Trails Initiative. My blood ran cold as I flipped through pages showing architectural renderings of walking paths, picnic shelters, and a carved stone entrance sign, Evelyn Richardson Nature Park, a Green Valley legacy. That was no innocent wellness walk. That was empire building. Evelyn hadn't simply enforced rules. She had started laying the groundwork to rename someone else's land after herself. The more I dug, the uglier it got. Public county permit applications revealed the HOA had filed environmental surveys and budget estimates for a community park development. Missing from those documents? Any proof of ownership.
"Nothing from Frank, nothing from me."
Just a series of forms submitted with a straight face, as if HOA jurisdiction magically extended into privately owned forest. They even staged fundraisers collecting special improvement assessments from homeowners to bankroll the project. Tens of thousands of dollars had already flowed through the HOA books. Money neighbors thought was building a community resource.
In reality, it was fraud with landscaping renderings attached. I knew I couldn't fight fire with words alone.
I needed counsel. That's when Amanda Lewis entered the picture. A real estate attorney recommended by a coworker, she studied the stack of documents I slid across her office desk with quiet astonishment. "This isn't just overreach," she said flatly. "This is a textbook example of attempted adverse possession without meeting a single requirement. You can't simply use land for 10 years without owner permission and then declare it yours. Did they pay the property taxes? No. Did they contact the legal owner? No, that alone buries any claim they think they have. Amanda leaned back, tapping her pen. You, on the other hand, if you purchase this land, Mr. Holloway, you eliminate any wiggle room they think exists. You go from concerned resident to legal landowner. And then, well, they're trespassers. On your terms. The plan crystallized faster than I expected. Over the following days, I negotiated with Frank. His initial figure of $800,000 stung, but with Amanda's guidance and my savings bolstered by a modest inheritance, we finalized at $750,000. It would practically wipe me out financially. But the gamble wasn't about deer hunting anymore. This was about principle. About making Evelyn understand she couldn't redraw maps to suit her ego. While Amanda pushed the paperwork through, the HOA stepped up their campaign. Anonymous notes appeared on my windshield. Animal killers aren't welcome here. My garbage cans mysteriously never made it back up my drive after collection. Neighbors who once smiled now crossed the street, eyes darting with Evelyn-fed gossip. Sarah Johnson, bless her, called late one night whispering like she was reporting from enemy territory. Evelyn's holding private gatherings. She's talking about securing city permits with Councilman Thompson. They're doubling down, Mason. They think the land's already theirs. But Evelyn wasn't preparing for resistance, she was rehearsing for coronation. Her husband Trevor, conveniently an architectural consultant, had his company Green Vision Consulting listed as the design firm on the park proposal. Marcus Bennett, her loyal vice president, was running interference at City Hall through his sister's connections. It wasn't just arrogance now. It smelled like profiteering, a family-run empire built off HOA dues under the guise of community good. The week before Thanksgiving, the deed closed. Amanda slid the signed papers across to me, and I held them deliberately, the weight of 80 acres suddenly mine. That night I slept less than 2 hours, adrenaline thrumming at what tomorrow would bring, because Evelyn thought her big move would be unveiling a lawsuit against me at my doorstep. She expected a resident cornered, a man apologizing, a wallet opening. What she would find instead was me calmly offering coffee before sliding across a folder, showing the deed to the very land she had tried to appropriate. Not hypothetical, not tomorrow, yesterday. Mine. When Evelyn came knocking at 9 sharp portfolio of legal threats in hand, I was already smiling. She stepped into my living room, certain she could bend me into compliance. Instead, she opened that folder and read the deed bearing my name in black ink. Watching Evelyn's face lose its color, watching Marcus tug nervously at his collar like the walls were already collapsing, was the first moment I realized I wasn't on defense anymore. I had flipped the battlefield. The HOA had been trespassing for years, and suddenly they were trespassing on my land. Owning that 80-acre parcel changed everything. It flipped Evelyn's smug certainty into panic, Marcus's loyalty into cold sweat, and the entire HOA board into a den of nervous silence. I could see it in the way they shuffled through meetings now, voices strained, eyes shifting. But if they thought I was going to stop at planting no trespassing signs and filing cease and desist letters, they hadn't grasped the truth. I wasn't interested only in keeping them out of my woods. I wanted to expose the entire rotten system they had built, brick by fraudulent brick. The first hints came quickly. Residents stopped me on the street with guarded whispers, frustration peeking past their fear. I gave $2,000 to that trail fund, one man told me. Never saw receipts. Never any accounting. A mother at the school fence confided, I thought it was just for benches, but then Evelyn kept asking for special contributions. Now she says the money's gone into permits. Then Robert Jackson, a retired accountant and former HOA board member, dropped the first bombshell in my living room. Evelyn had known for years the land wasn't community property, but she told the board to forget about contacting the owner. Robert had resigned after that. Others obeyed and kept quiet. By now my attorney Amanda had taught me to look at every HOA initiative like an audit. So with Sarah's help and Robert's old files, I filed public records requests, poring over years of so-called park improvement allocations. The numbers stank. Nearly $75,000 supposedly raised and spent on trail projects, but with invoices written in vague language, consulting services, environmental planning, and all of them conveniently approved outside the usual board checks. Nancy Roberts, the HOA secretary, Looked like she lived with a constant knot between her shoulders. She finally cracked when I met her in a coffee shop 2 towns away. She slid a flash drive across the table with trembling hands. "I can't let her ruin me," Nancy whispered, glancing over her shoulder as though Evelyn's shadow followed her everywhere. But people need to know the truth. That flash drive was pure dynamite. Inside were financial spreadsheets and contracts linking every suspicious payment to Green Vision Consulting, an architectural firm run by none other than Trevor Adams, Evelyn's husband, along with Patricia Bennett, Marcus's sister. It was a family-run siphon, created to receive HOA money under the guise of legitimate work, except this wasn't work. This was wealth laundering. Payments inflated threefold above industry standards, invoices approved only by Evelyn, no competitive bid, and no record of deliverables. Residents believed their assessments were building a park. Instead, they were furnishing renovations at Evelyn's home and financing Trevor's consulting firm vacations to Portland wine country. I called my contact at the sheriff's office after Amanda confirmed the document's legitimacy. Detective Alex Morgan, a specialist in financial crimes, listened silently as I explained. Then he said, "Mr. Holloway, this isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This looks like donation fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud, maybe even tax evasion. If your evidence holds up, this entire board is looking at felony charges." That was the moment I realized I had shifted from neighborly annoyance to being the whistleblower at the center of a full criminal investigation. Evelyn must have sensed the storm building because her counterattacks grew more desperate. Notes taped to my truck accused me of killing nature. Old ladies paraded "Save Our Trails" signs outside my driveway, clearly orchestrated by her. Local Facebook groups filled with smears about me being violent and unstable. Sarah told me the school principal had warned her that associating with disruptive residents could affect her contract renewal. It was classic intimidation, designed to poison the well and make me either leave or fold. But I'd been in tougher battles than a suburban smear campaign. Meanwhile, I set my own psyops into motion. With Amanda's help, I drafted a careful, factual letter addressed to every single Green Valley homeowner. It walked them through the fraudulent trail fund step by step, the fundraising amounts, the shell company invoices, the conflicts of interest, the trail camera photos of board members trespassing at night to rip down my signs. At the end, I made an offer. If Evelyn and her board step down, I'll allow residents supervised access to a real, legally designated trail on my land. If not, every financial document is going to investigators and the press. When that letter hit mailboxes, the cracks widened. I saw residents talking in small, angry clusters at their mailboxes. John Peterson, a retired banker who had donated $5,000 to the fund, stormed at a meeting demanding receipts. Cynthia Miller, usually one of Evelyn's cheerleaders, broke ranks to demand an audit. The silence around Evelyn was fraying, and panic made her careless. At the next meeting, her temper detonated. "You'll regret ever moving here, Holloway." She snapped across the room, her voice trembling with fury. She promised ruin in front of 30 witnesses. To her, it was intimidation. To me, it was evidence. I recorded every word. Behind her controlled blazer and smile, Evelyn was a cornered queen. Her nature park throne built on fraud, her inner circle tied by nepotism, her empire built on the residents' fear of embarrassment and legal costs. But she had underestimated the wrong man. I wasn't just another cautious homeowner willing to pay to make her go away. I worked in cybersecurity. I had combated fraud online, tracked perpetrators through code. Now I was training the same lens on her paper empire. I looked at my corkboard that night. Names, red string, financial totals. And for the first time, I didn't see Goliath anymore. I saw rot, an empire already crumbling. Evelyn controlled gossip, but I controlled law, documents, and light. And law documented carefully as sunlight. I wasn't finished yet. Evelyn's empire wasn't just going to fall. I was going to dismantle it, piece by fraudulent piece, until even the faithful whisperers who had followed her for years realized what they'd built their trust on. Nothing but lies. Once the evidence was on the table, the HOA's carefully polished mask started slipping. For years, Evelyn had relied on intimidation, secrecy, and residents' unwillingness to rock the boat. But under pressure, fear collapses. And when it collapses publicly, it takes reputations down with it. Everything converged at the special HOA meeting Evelyn herself had called. She framed it as a chance to set the record straight on the supposed falsehoods spread by me. I knew better. It was damage control, a desperate attempt to hold her shrinking kingdom together. The Green Valley Community Center was packed shoulder to shoulder, residents spilling into the hallways and even the parking lot. People who hadn't attended an HOA meeting in years suddenly wanted to see blood. Evelyn strutted to the podium in a crisp white blazer, Trevor close behind with glossy poster boards of the Evelyn Richardson Nature Park renderings. Marcus hovered nearby, flipping through talking points. She spoke with her usual affected calm, but the twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her nerves. Mr. Holloway has attempted to poison our community with malicious lies, she declared into the microphone. The Green Valley Trails have been enjoyed by residents for decades, and our park project represents years of vision and dedication. She gestured dramatically to Trevor's renderings, tree-lined walking paths, a playground, even an amphitheater. It would have been beautiful, if it weren't all built on land that never belonged to her. When she invoked decades of community stewardship, a man in the back shouted, "Then why did you tell us it already belonged to the HOA?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Evelyn tried to plow forward, but the tension was visible now. When my turn to speak came, I stood slowly, documents in hand. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult. Calm dismantling was more devastating than rage. "Let's talk about facts," I said evenly. Fact 1, this land has never been HOA property. I held up Frank's deed, now in my name. Fact 2, over $75,000 in donations were solicited for a park the HOA had no right to build. Fact 3, that money went directly into Green Vision Consulting, a company owned by our president's husband and the vice president's sister. Gasps erupted like cracks in a dam. The treasurer, Richard Cooper, paled and stammered from his seat. I was told those payments were standard." Then his voice dropped to a mutter. "I didn't know. It wasn't disclosed." Whispers spread like wildfire among the residents. Evelyn slammed her palm on the podium, eyes blazing. "Enough! These are fabrications. They've been twisted deliberately by a man who never cared about this community and is trying to enrich himself." Her voice was no longer polished. It was raw, angry, desperate. Before the murmurs could die down, a tired but steady voice rose from the corner. Nancy Roberts, the secretary who had lived in Evelyn's shadow for too long, stood clutching a folder. "That's not true, Evelyn," she said, shaking but resolute. "I was there. I saw the invoices. You threatened my job when I questioned them. You told us to lie about ownership if anyone asked. This wasn't about the community. It was about your name on a stone sign." The room exploded. Shouts overlapped with demands for answers. One man cried out, "I donated $5,000. Where's my money?" Another asked, "Why didn't you tell us this was private land?" Evelyn tried to yell them down, but the once docile crowd wasn't docile anymore. For the first time, she looked small, standing against a current of residents who refused to play along. And then, as if on cue, the back doors opened. In walked Detective Alex Morgan with District Attorney William Hayes at his side. They didn't shout or wave badges. They didn't need to. Their presence alone shifted the temperature of the room. Evelyn's face drained of color the moment she saw them. The DA stood at the back, arms folded, listening as Evelyn scrambled to reassert control over the screaming chaos. "This is insane," she barked, voice shrill now. "If I bent a few procedural rules, it was for the community. Would you rather let some gun-toting outsider shut down decades of progress?" She jabbed a finger toward me, trying to frame me as the villain one more time, but no one was looking at me anymore. They were looking at Nancy. They were looking at the DA. They were looking at each other. Richard Cooper, who had been complicit in silence for years, suddenly found a backbone. "You lied to me, Evelyn. You lied to all of us," he said aloud, shocking even himself. He dropped his papers on the table, disgust written across his face. The DA finally stepped forward. "In light of the ongoing investigation," Hayes said firmly, "we advise this association to appoint interim leadership until these financial irregularities are resolved." It was as measured as it was devastating. Evelyn sputtered, "I will not resign. This is slander. This is all defamatory lies." But the room no longer believed her. The facade was gone. When she stormed out, Trevor scurrying behind, Marcus trailing like a half-deflated balloon, boos followed them out the door. Phones recorded every second. Residents gathered in hallways firing questions into live streams, while Emily Chen, the reporter, grinned as she captured quotes, her notebook filling with testimony. For Evelyn, it was the beginning of the end. For the HOA, it was the moment of collapse. All the gossip, threats, and arrogance crumbled beneath the weight of evidence. What had been whispered in fear for years was spoken aloud in fury in front of cameras. And for me, standing quietly while the noise surged around, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about winning an argument. This was about dismantling a regime. Step by step, brick by brick, Evelyn's empire was falling, and I hadn't even shown the final piece of evidence yet. Evelyn's storming exit from that HOA meeting wasn't the final act, though in hindsight it felt like the crack of thunder right before the sky breaks. Within days, the investigation accelerated like an avalanche. Detective Morgan, wielding Nancy's testimony and the trove of HOA records hidden in Trevor Adams's storage unit, connected every thread. The shell company, the fraudulent fundraising, the falsified permits. Residents who had once been too timid to speak suddenly lined up at the sheriff's office to provide statements. And the evidence didn't trickle in, and it poured, drowning Evelyn's carefully crafted narrative in black and white numbers. 2 mornings later, 3 patrol cars idled at the Richardson household while flashing lights painted the manicured lawns. Neighbors stood in clusters, phones raised, filming as deputies carried out box after box of financial documents. Trevor Adams, pale and sweating, was led out in cuffs. Patricia Bennett tried to feign confidence but collapsed into frantic tears when reporters swarmed her. And then came Evelyn herself, lips pursed, eyes darting as officers guided her into the cruiser. She tried one last desperate quip for the cameras. This is all political theater. But the sight of the once untouchable president being driven away broke something larger than her legacy. It shattered the illusion of dominance she had lorded for years. The official charges landed like hammer strikes: fraud, embezzlement, misuse of association funds, tax violations. Bail was set high, the DA's office promising a full audit of the HOA's books. The figure that emerged was staggering. Over $100,000 siphoned, disguised as consulting fees and improvements, but in reality funneled into luxury vacations, kitchen renovations, and Evelyn's personal law firm wardrobe. When the news hit Green Valley, the community erupted, not with fear as in the past, but with fury. Homeowners demanded an emergency vote. For the first time in a decade, Evelyn's board dissolved under overwhelming pressure. She hadn't just lost her grip. She had lost her crown, her allies, her home. Within a month, the DA announced plea deals: probation, suspended sentences, repayment of stolen HOA funds, and poetic justice, a 10-year ban from serving on any HOA or nonprofit board. For a woman who had built her identity around control, the punishment stung deeper than prison walls. But while Evelyn and her cronies slunk away, Green Valley was in flux. Chaos could have left it fractured, neighbors bickering, trust gone. But instead, something remarkable happened. The very people who had once sat silently through Evelyn's lectures found their voices. And at the first reformed meeting, Sarah Johnson, the schoolteacher whose kindness had always preceded her courage, was voted interim president unanimously. She wasn't hungry for glory. She just promised transparency, fairness, and to actually listen. Under her leadership, bylaws were rewritten, financial audits became standard procedure, and HOA meetings transformed from tribunals into conversations. As for me, my promise stood. On a portion of my land, surveyed and certified, I created a real community trail. Not an embezzled vanity project, but a legitimate, permitted path, preserved as a wildlife corridor. At the entry gate, mounted on a weatherproof plaque, was the name I chose for it: the Frank Williams Memorial Trail. His story, of farming that land 50 years earlier, of entrusting it to me with a single kind email, was engraved beneath. Residents now hiked it legally, grateful, respectful, knowing its history rather than pretending ownership through trespass. The money Evelyn and Trevor were forced to repay sparked another idea. At my suggestion, $75,000 of it was earmarked as the Green Valley Scholarship Fund for Ethics and Leadership. Every year, local students would receive aid to study law, civics, or community service. It was a way of turning Evelyn's theft into legacy, only not hers. A legacy of accountability, of integrity. The change in the neighborhood was visible almost overnight. Where once people turned their heads away from me in the street, they now stopped to chat. Elderly couples thanked me for exposing what they'd quietly endured for years. Parents waved as their kids used the trail. Even Sarah laughed one evening, saying, "I think you've gone from villain to folk hero." Meanwhile, Evelyn's downfall was making ripples beyond our community. Emily Chen's investigative articles spread countywide, then statewide. Green Valley became a case study in HOA overreach, an example cited in editorials about property rights and corruption. Regulators began whispering about new oversight laws. The irony wasn't lost on me. What began with one illegal fine against me was now shaping broader conversations about HOA reform. One evening, as the sun sank over the western pines, I sat on my porch with Sarah Johnson and a few other neighbors. Wine glasses clinked, kids' laughter carried on the warm air. For the first time since I moved here, Green Valley felt human, not weaponized bylaws and power games, but real people building roots. Teacher who baked cookies, a banker sharing advice, families planning barbecues. Slowly, the fences of fear Evelyn had built crumbled into friendships. I thought back to that crisp morning in the woods, Evelyn shrieking at me for hunting legally on property that wasn't hers. Her outrage had been the spark, her arrogance the gasoline. She thought she controlled every inch of Green Valley, every mailbox and mailbox key. But she forgot the first rule of control. It only works if people believe it's real. The moment fear is replaced with truth, tyranny collapses under its own weight. As night settled, a neighbor asked me if it was worth it. The stress, the smear campaigns, the lawsuit threats. I looked at the Frank Williams Memorial Trail winding into my woods, and at the faces of people who had rediscovered what community actually meant. "Worth it?" I said softly. "It gave us something Evelyn never could, honesty. And that makes it priceless." Green Valley was no longer Evelyn's kingdom. It was truly ours. And she fittingly moved to an apartment across town. A nice place, I hear. No HOA, how ironic.